cold wind was a screaming thing. It tore across the mountain base. It cut through metal. It cut through canvas. It cut straight to the bone. This was FOB Kestrel, a brutal, high-altitude outpost. Nobody belonged here. Sergeant Carla Weston was a quiet shadow in the supply tent. She worked under floodlights. She stacked frozen crates with surgical precision. She was always alone. No one knew her past. No one ever asked about it. They knew she was effective. They knew she was silent. They knew nothing else. Captain Hale was a loud man. He liked his power on display. He mistook silence for insolence. He saw Carla as an inconvenience, just a logistics NCO. Earlier that morning, she had corrected him. She corrected his manifest in front of his 2 private soldiers. The correction was factual. It was delivered quietly, but it landed like a slap. Hale's pride was shattered by a supply clerk. This humiliation burned hotter than the mountain sun. He decided she needed a lesson. He needed to re-establish control. He chose the evening for his display. He walked into the tent with a slow, heavy swagger. He carried a metal bucket. It was frosted on the outside, ice water sloshed inside. 2 of his men, Corporal Evans and Private Diaz, followed him. They looked half amused. They looked half uncertain. Hale stopped directly in front of Carla. He grinned that brittle, mean kind of grin. He didn't even speak. He just lifted the bucket high. The icy water crashed over her head. It hit her like a hammer. The shock was immediate. It soaked through every layer of her uniform. It clung to her like armor. Evans and Diaz went silent instantly. They had expected screaming. They had expected stumbling. They expected tears. Carla did none of that. She didn't yell. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Water dripped from her eyelashes. Her uniform suddenly looked like steel. She simply stood her ground. Then she took one perfect step forward. Her movement was smooth. It was precise. Her hand came up in a blur. It was not a punch. It was a heel palm strike. It was driven upward under his jawline. The sound was a loud, sickening crack, like a rifle stock breaking on stone. Hale dropped immediately. His body folded. His mind never registered what happened. He was out cold before he reached the ground. The silence in the tent was heavy. Even the wind seemed to pause. Carla exhaled once. The movement was simple. It was habit. It was more control than emotion. "Get the medic," she said quietly. "Tell the major the captain slipped." Who was this woman? Why did a simple supply clerk have that devastating skill? Carla was confined 2 hours later. They had no brig. They locked her in a steel container. It was used for hazardous material storage. 4 bare walls, 1 small cot, a single flickering light bulb. The base slept uneasy beneath a bruised purple sky. Major Davies stood alone in the command shack. He was tired. He was practical. He was not blind. He read the incident reports. They were identical. Captain poured ice water. Sergeant struck Captain once. Captain unconscious for 60 seconds. No further aggression. Hale's jaw was broken. His pride was worse. Regulations demanded a court-martial. Assault on a superior officer was clear. But something did not fit the story. Carla's file was on his desk. It was redacted. Whole sections were blacked out. Commendations were missing citations. Whatever she had done before this post, someone had erased it completely. Davies looked up at the wall map. A red line snaked toward the mountain ridge. It was labeled the Tooth. That was the captain's last known patrol location. 4 men were due back hours ago. Outside, the wind was no longer just blowing. It was roaring. It was a living, screaming thing. Snow was falling sideways. The radio crackled with static. "Kestrel base to Viper 1. Do you copy?" Nothing but noise. Davies' stomach twisted in fear. They were still out there. The lieutenant spoke quietly. "Sir, we can't send anyone. Winds are at 80 knots. Visibility is 0. Any team we send won't come back." Davies stared at the redacted file again. He saw the black lines. They hid more truth than they revealed. He grabbed his parka quickly. He walked out into the storm. The storage unit door groaned open. Carla sat on the cot. She was perfectly still. The light flickered over her expressionless eyes. "Sergeant," Davies shouted over the rising wind, "I have a problem." She looked up slowly. Her voice was level. It was calm. "You've lost them." He nodded once. 4 men. Storms worse than anything we've seen. We can't reach them." He swallowed hard. Can you find them?" Her answer was a quiet, single sentence. It was not a request. It was an order. "Open the crate marked 7B. Davies hesitated deeply. "That's restricted gear, classified." Carla stood up fully. Her shadow stretched across the wall. It looked larger than a person. "Then stop asking for miracles." She stepped past him into the white snow. A bolt cutter snapped twice. The heavy lock clattered onto the frozen ground. Carla Weston threw open the lid of crate 7B. A hiss of cold vapor rose immediately. The gear inside looked like it had been waiting. Nestled in foam were tools that did not exist on any manifest. Experimental cold ops equipment. It gleamed faintly under the flickering bulb. Lightweight thermal suits shimmered. They looked like liquid metal. Compact oxygen regulators were stacked neatly. Modular snow anchors lay ready. Everything the captain had dismissed as unnecessary was now their only hope. "Strip," she ordered Evans, Diaz, and Chun. "Down to base layer. That standard issue junk will turn you into corpses in 2 hours. Move." Fear outranked pride instantly. They obeyed without question. Carla tossed each man a shimmering suit. She checked her own regulator. She clipped a small signal beacon to her chest. Her voice never rose. It carried a different kind of authority. Authority earned the hard way. "The mountain doesn't care who you are," she said quietly. "It only decides who deserves to come back." She led them out into the white void. The first step was like stepping onto another planet. Snow did not fall here. It flew sideways. Horizontal knives of ice slashed through the night air. The wind screamed with the pitch of jet engines. Carla leaned into it strongly. Her silhouette was a dark wedge against the chaos. She moved like a ghost. Each motion was deliberate. Each motion was efficient. They walked for hours. Time itself froze solid. The storm erased all direction. It erased all color. Only the crunch of snow beneath their boots proved they still existed. Carla adjusted their heading by touch. She felt the wind shift slightly. She gauged the density underfoot. Evans began to understand fully. She was not navigating by sight. She was reading the mountain itself. She read it like an old soldier reads a battlefield. At one point, the wind's pitch shifted. A subtle, high whistle. Only she seemed to hear it. She lifted a hand. "Ridge ahead," she shouted. "We go low." They crawled the next 50 meters. A single wrong step meant a 1,000-foot fall. When they cleared it, the storm screamed louder. As if furious it had missed them. Evans looked at her through the haze of snow. "How the hell do you know where to go?" Carla didn't turn. "You stopped listening to the storm. When you've lived in it long enough." Hours later, a faint vibration came through the snow. The low, mechanical hum of wind moving around solid rock. "We're close," she announced. She trudged toward a jagged granite outcrop. She unhooked the signal booster from her pack. She began assembling it with machine-like speed. Metal rods, wires, power cells, everything locked together perfectly. "This won't carry voice," she said clearly. "But if any of their radios are still warm, we'll catch a pulse." She swept the antenna in a slow arc. For a long minute there was nothing at all. Then, beep, faint, irregular. Then, beep, stronger. Her eyes narrowed behind her goggles. Got them. She pointed down slope, 30 meters, under the drift. Move. They clawed at the snow. Adrenaline burned hotter than the cold. One by one, shapes emerged from the snow. 4 men. Alive. Barely. Carla slid down beside the first man, a sergeant with a splintered leg. His pulse was weaker than a whisper. She tore open his jacket. Her sleeve slipped up as she worked. It revealed her skin. It was cross-hatched with faint silvery scars. There was a faded tattoo, 2 wings folded around a dagger and a medical staff. Evans froze completely. His older brother had told him stories about that mark. The Archangels, a classified rescue unit. So elite most soldiers thought it was a myth. He stared at her. Realization crashed over him. "Ma'am," his voice broke, "you're one of them." She didn't look up from her work. "Not anymore," she said flatly. She pressed a defibrillator patch to the sergeant's chest, charging 200 joules. The machine whirred loudly. The air smelled of ozone. "My brother used to talk about someone named Kestrel," Evans whispered. "Said she once hiked a mile through a whiteout with a wounded seal on her back." Carla's hand paused for a fraction of a second. Clear. The sergeant's body jerked slightly. A heartbeat fluttered under her palm. "Welcome back," she whispered to the unconscious man. By the time they stabilized the last man, the storm was shifting again. The mountain gave one last roar. Carla glanced up at the faint gray glow above. "We move now or we die here." Evans blinked at her. "Move them in this?" She locked eyes with him. "Evacuate. 2 litters. Field rig with poles and blankets. We don't stop. We don't sleep. We carry them home." She turned toward the endless white. As they began the descent, Carla slowed suddenly. Her eyes went up. They followed her gaze through the haze of snow. Something twisted loomed ahead. It jutted from the ice. As they got closer, the shape resolved into wreckage. Metal framework, scorch marks, half buried, a downed drone. Recon grade. "Ours?" Evans asked. "Negative," she said, brushing away snow. It bore foreign stenciling. "Not American." Chun frowned. "You're telling me someone else is running surveillance here?" Carla crouched beside the lens. It faced the fob's direction. "It was looking at us." She added a cold realization. "And it was armed." A chill that had nothing to do with the weather passed through the group. Evans swallowed hard. "So this isn't just a storm rescue anymore." Carla stood up. Her eyes narrowed behind the frost. "No. This is a message." She kicked snow over the wreckage. "Move. We get them home first." But her instincts screamed. They were not alone on this mountain. By the time the sky faded from gray to black, they had been moving for nearly 12 hours. The rescued men were slipping deep into unconsciousness. "Set down," Carla commanded. "We build shelter." Now. Within an hour they had carved a dome, just big enough for all 8 of them. Inside, the wind was only a muffled hum. Carla moved through the cramped space, checking vitals, distributing heat packs. Every action was deliberate. Evans watched her hands, steady, scarred, surgical. "You really were one of them, weren't you?" he murmured. "Task Force Archangel." "I was never supposed to exist, Corporal," she said. "Let's keep it that way." A heavy silence fell. Then Carla's head snapped up. A sound, faint, metallic, not wind, not snow. She crawled toward the cave mouth. She peered out into the black night. The storm had eased, but visibility was thin. She saw movement. 2 figures, faint outlines, maybe 50 yards away. They were walking upright. Evans was instantly awake. His hand found his rifle. "Infrared goggles," she whispered. He slid them over his eyes. He froze completely. The two heat signatures were walking toward them. "Ma'am," his throat was dry. "Those aren't ours." She was already strapping on her harness. Movement was smooth and silent. "Then it looks like the storm didn't kill everyone up here." Evan's pulse pounded in his ears. "What do we do?" Carla looked back at the unconscious survivors. She looked at the fragile breathing under the blankets, then back at the two shapes closing in. She took a slow breath. "We draw them off." Evan's eyes widened in protest. "You and Diaz keep them alive. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, you lead them home." "Ma'am, that's suicide." She silenced him with a look. It was colder than the snow outside. "It's called buying time." She slipped out into the night. The cave fell utterly silent. Then, somewhere out in the dark, came the unmistakable sound of a fight. A dull crack, a muffled shout, then silence again. Evans trembled. He could hear his own frantic breathing. Just before he could move, a flare burst through the snow. Bright red, it painted the storm in blood and fire. Carla Weston was still alive. She moved like a shadow. Every flake of snow was an ally. The wind masked her position. She saw them through the faint red light. Two hostiles, shapes bulked with cold weather gear. They moved cautiously. They did not expect resistance out here. That was their mistake. She waited until one man stepped past a jagged rock outcrop. The fight was short. It was brutal. It was silent. When it ended, the red flare sputtered out. The mountain went dark again. She returned to the cave mouth. Her silhouette was a dark, frost-bitten figure, stepping out of legend. Her shoulders sagged with exhaustion, but her eyes were clear. "You're alive." Diaz exhaled hard. Carla nodded once. She dropped a shattered transmitter into the snow. "They won't be reporting home." Evans stared at the broken device, then back at her. "Who the hell were they?" "Not our problem anymore," she said. Her voice was low. "Our job's to get the living back." The way she said it was calm. It was absolute. It made even the mountains seem smaller. At dawn, the world had changed completely. The storm was gone. The air was thin. It blew with light. The path back to FOB Kestrel lay stretched across a glittering expanse. Carla led again. Each step was deliberate. The rescued soldiers were barely clinging to life. The sun rose over the ridgeline. It spilled gold across the peaks. For the first time in 2 days, she could see the world. It was brutal. It was magnificent. It was endless. When the first gray helicopter appeared, the men didn't cheer. They just stopped walking. Every one of them stood still, watching it descend. For Evans, it felt like the end of a story no one would believe. Carla just muttered, "About time." Major Davies was waiting, his parka whipped in the rotor wash. His eyes were wide with disbelief. Medics sprinted toward the litters. Carla barely spoke a word. "They're hypothermic. Miller's leg is a compound fracture, but he's stable." Davies tried to speak her name. He didn't know what to call her. She looked at him once. Her face was expressionless under the frost. "You did the right thing opening that door, Major. Let's not make a habit of it." She walked past him. By midday, the base was silent again. The rescued patrol lay in the med tent, wrapped in heat blankets. Inside the command shack, Major Davies stood over the after-action reports. His tone was clipped. "Your decision to deploy during a developing storm will be noted, Captain Thorne." Hale, wearing a jaw brace, could only manage a slight nod. "Understood, sir." Davies tapped a file. Carla Weston's name was stamped across the top in red ink. "As for Sergeant Weston, her court-martial is off the table." He paused. "Officially, she remains a logistics specialist." Hale looked up. His eyes were narrowed. And unofficially, Davies exhaled slowly. His gaze softened grudgingly. Unofficially, she saved half this base, including you. The captain said nothing more. Outside, Carla stood near the perimeter fence, watching the horizon. The sky had turned soft pink. Her hands rested on the handle of her ice axe. Evans approached quietly. Major says they're going to name the ridge after you. Carla didn't turn around. They should name it after the ones who didn't make it. He hesitated. I didn't thank you for any of it. You don't have to, she said. You made it back. That's enough. He smiled faintly. What you did up there? You were more than a soldier. Carla looked at him then, tired, scarred, but steady. I wasn't anything special, Corporal. I just refused to let another team freeze in silence. He swallowed hard. You know they're already calling you something out there. Oh? The Archangel of Kestrel's Perch. Carla blinked once. She looked back at the mountains. Let them. That night, the base was calm again. Inside the supply tent, Carla hadn't stopped moving. Her parka hung from a chair. Her sleeves were rolled up past her elbows. They revealed the faint network of scars on her forearms. On the top before her lay her tools. Rope, carabiners, the axe. Each one was cleaned. Each one was sharpened. All done with the same surgical precision as before. Evans entered quietly. He carried 2 mugs of coffee. You ever sleep? Sometimes, she said, not looking up from her work. He set 1 mug beside her. They're asking for you at the med tent. The rescue team wants to see you. Carla ran the wet stone along the axe's edge once more. Let them rest. They don't owe me anything. Evans sat across from her slowly. You ever think maybe that's not the point? She finally paused her work. She met his eyes. He wasn't grinning this time. He was just calm. You didn't just save them, ma'am. You changed all of us. The air between them hung still. Slowly, Carla set the axe down completely. I didn't come here to change anyone, Corporal. I came here because I ran out of wars to fight. She paused. Guess the mountain found one for me. Evans nodded slowly. His eyes glinted in the dim light. If it hadn't, we'd all be dead. Carla looked down at her hands. They were scarred. They were calloused. They were incredibly capable. Then maybe it was worth it. The next morning, the world was quiet again. The snow had softened into a reflective sheet of white. The helicopter engine started in the distance. Another rotation. Carla walked past the hangars. Soldiers paused as she passed her. Not to salute, not to stare, just to watch. A few straightened unconsciously, as if standing a little taller might make them part of something bigger. She didn't notice any of it. She didn't need to. She stopped near the perimeter. The peaks of the serpent's tooth glowed gold in the sunlight. She stood in silence for a long time, her eyes fixed on the horizon, the place where the storm had come from, and the place she had gone.